video of this garden series, which is all about planning out your garden for this year. If you're new to gardening, this is going to teach you what to plant, when to plant it, where to plant it, why you should be planting it, and how to plant it. Now, just to quickly recap, we spoke about what to plant is where you made a list of the foods that you actually eat or flowers that you love to look at and that you can think to grow and harvest. So we started with that list, and then you saw what seeds you had, saw what seeds you needed to buy, and wrote down any kind of information about the seeds that you knew on this helpful PDF, which is helping you plan your garden. You can download that from the description box below if you don't already have a planner. Follow that guide. Second, we talked about when to plant stuff. This is where you had a garden calendar and you plotted out roughly when you should be starting stuff indoors, transplanting those seedlings outdoors, or if you can just sow directly into the garden. Now, to figure out when you should be planting stuff, I recommended that you go to almanac.com and print a list based on your area that is all based on your last frost date and your first frost date, again at the end of the season, as well as the moon's phases. Learn all about that in the prior video if you don't know what I'm talking about. Today we're going to be talking about mapping out your garden, sketching out what kind of garden space you have, where you think what crops can go, can you rotate that space and grow 2 crops in one area in the garden season. That is all today. So how I plan out our garden is I grab a piece of paper. That can be any size, a printer paper, a notebook, the back of a receipt, whatever you've got, and sketch out the lines of your garden spaces. You don't have to be an artist to do this. You're just drawing a rough area of the garden space that you have because you're just trying to determine what could go where. I suggest you use pencil just so you can erase and make a lot of changes. So let's say that you have a backyard that is a big square and you know that you're going to be gardening around the edge of it. Draw that out. If you know that there's a big tree beside your back door where your garden is going to be starting, draw that out because it's helpful to know what is going to be shaded out and what you should, maybe not plant something there that is wanting a bunch of sun, like tomatoes or peppers. Alright, so you're sketching out your garden, the area that you know that you have, very roughly, doesn't have to be too specific. And then if you have any kind of trellis to set up, if you've gardened before, kind of an arch trellis or any kind of cattle panel, you want to sketch those out too so that you just know, okay, I can plant stuff here that can trellis or grow over an arch. And then you'll also know that by the end of the season, once that plant is matured, it's going to probably shade out that area, so whatever's following that should be able to grow in shade, things like that. So sketch out as much as you know on a piece of paper. That's what I did here. We've got 4 big rows out there, 30 by 60 foot beds, 30 inch beds by 60 feet. I think that's what we did. And I've got 4 of them. I sketched out my trellis area. I know I've got a cattle panel down here and a small little trellis over here. I know there's a big tree right over here. I don't know how much you can see on this right now, but I sketched out the rough design of our garden area. Now, to figure out what I can plant where, I'm going to use my handy notes that I made about how long things take to mature and roughly when I'm going to be planting it out. So this is my printout from the almanac.com where I've listed the crops I'm going to be growing and how long they take to mature, and I have the dates that I'm going to be starting them on this sheet. Now, when I'm approaching my garden planning, there is a bit of understanding necessary of how much room something can take up. And an easy way to do this, if this is your first year gardening or you're not really familiar with how big plants get or what they even look like, you could just Google, a fully mature broccoli plant or a fully mature cabbage plant. And that way you kind of have an idea how it grows and how big it gets roughly. With root crops, you can imagine how big is the actual vegetable, and that will give me a rough idea how much one will take up. So one seed will take up that much room. For things that grow above ground like squash or watermelon or tomatoes, plants can go kind of wild. So you wouldn't really know unless you've done it before or seen a plant in someone else's garden. So if you're doing your research and you're trying to figure out how much room something will take up, just Google it. Even sunflowers, Google the variety and see what does pictures of it look like. Whoa, this is gonna get so big and its plants take up roughly how much room. Remember, everything that we're doing in this planning is just a rough idea. Who can truly know, right? And then you want to start plotting. Do it in pencil. You're probably gonna erase and move stuff around. It's not super easy, but you can do this. If I can do it with my little knowledge, you can do it too. Now, start with the things that are already limiting that you know you can't change. For example, if you have a massive tree somewhere and you know that it is going to shade out half of the yard, you already have some kind of limitation that that area isn't going to get as much sun as another area. Use that to your advantage. You know that you should be planting crops that love shade in that area and leaving the ones that love sun in the other area. So there you've got kind of a structure already. What helps me is that I already have trellises put up in certain areas, so I know that I need to use those areas for the things that need to trellis. For example, I have an arch trellis set up here. I hope you can see that. Maybe it's better this way. We have an arch trellis set up here, and so I already know that I need to plant my cucumbers, and I don't even know if I have my cucumbers on here. Maybe it's helpful to have a list and take off while you're going so you don't miss stuff. But back to the point, I already know that I need to plant my trellising tomatoes somewhere because they take up a lot of space and we grow a lot of tomatoes. So I'm gonna leave my arch trellis for my tomatoes. I'm probably gonna swap the beds that I plant them in this year. We did them in this bed last year, so we'll probably do them in this bed this year. But that's a limitation that I have, and so that is gonna help me plan because I already know that I need to use up that space for that. I don't even need to wonder what is going to go in this place, and I know tomatoes aren't going to go anywhere else unless they're a bush variety, which I may plop a few here and there. Again, just a rough idea. Ooh, companion planting, we should talk about that. Beginner gardener, can you tell? Okay, use what you have as limitations to start the planting. I also have a trellis down here, so what else am I going to plant that's trellising? I know that I'm also planting winter squash that needs to trellis. I also am planting some watermelon that needs to trellis. How did I know that? I did the Googling in the first part of this to see how the plant grows, so I have a rough idea of what it looks like. And most seed packets will actually tell you also if it will vine or, how else is it referred to it? Pole. For pole beans, it'll say this is a pole variety. Generally, it'll use the words vine or pole or stakes necessary or trellis. Some may refer to it, so that's a helpful guide to know. Else, do your research. So the other things that I'm growing that are trellising is my winter squash and my watermelon. So I plan to put my watermelon on the other side of my tomatoes. So while the tomatoes are growing up on one end, they may make it over, you know, at some point. But I may as well start my watermelon on one end. Let me just mention to you, if you are doing an arch trellis, plants don't really grow downward. So there's this idea that you can, well, if you're thinking this, which isn't silly because I also thought this, if you're thinking that something can grow totally over to the other side, it cannot. It can only grow upwards. Plants will grow only up, not down, unless they are super trellised and every week you are grabbing onto that plant. But it'll kind of grow like this and you'll have to force it down. So with that in mind, use both sides of an arch trellis if you are arch trellising. You want to, and I should actually put a list about crops that like companion planting. What that is that, for example, tomatoes grow really well beside peppers. And so I know that I can put my tomato plants on this trellis over here, and beside it, where there's open room on the soil, I can pop in my pepper plants there because they do really like tomatoes. They're friends, they want to grow together, they like each other. Keep in mind, when things are growing to full maturity, they will start shading out other things. You kind of want to just keep that in the back of your mind. Like, I can't totally plant all my peppers on this side because if I know my sun comes over like this, it's gonna shade out my peppers if this is fully grown, and peppers need a lot of sun and heat to grow. Do they need a lot of sun? Maybe they do like a little bit of shade at some point. I'm not sure, but that's something you can find out and see if that'll work then. I'm making this so complicated and I don't mean for it to be. The best way you're actually gonna know how to plant stuff is just to go out there with a rough idea and see how it grows for garden season. That's the best way to learn, honestly, is through experience. Like last year, we grew our tomatoes on this side of the trellis. which totally shaded out this area by the time we had our winter squashes put over here, which that wasn't super ideal, and we didn't have as much winter squash, and we probably would have had more had we not shaded them out, you know? So that is a mistake that I made, and you can't really plan for that in advance. Maybe you can, maybe I could have, but I didn't know. I didn't quite know what it would look like until I saw it. So give yourself grace, you're not gonna know everything. Plan out a rough idea and try to think of how is this gonna grow and how is it gonna look when it is fully mature. So you can sort of try to avoid things like shading out your winter squashes like I did. You're not gonna totally know, so just put down what you do know. Another thing that is helpful is to kind of know how your sun is gonna move over your garden. The only way to really know this is to have lived there a season before. Now when we moved in here, I had no idea what our summer season looked like here. And so I asked our landlords, hey, how does the sun move in the summer? And they were able to tell me, oh, in the summer, the sun comes up over here and it sets over here. And I know that its high point is gonna be up here. So perfect garden setup. If you're new to a area, go speak to your neighbors. You can ask anyone who's lived there before if they're still in the area and you can have any kind of communication with them. Ask people, do you roughly know where the sun came up? And they may be able to guide you through the house, oh, by the bathroom, you know? And that way you just have an idea of how the sun is gonna be moving, and then you can imagine the shade. I'm putting massive sunflowers here and the sun is coming from over here. As it's coming up, it's gonna shade out the things behind it, and so on. Rough idea, kind of know what's going on. Oh, what else is important is this tree over here. If my sun is coming up over here and my sun is setting over here, I know that in the afternoons, this tree, as big as it'll get, which I didn't know how big it would get, is gonna shade out a big part of the garden over here. So that is helpful to know. Let us wrap up and see what we all covered here. So we sketched out our garden, a rough design of what you have to work with to garden. We added in where there's trees or where you have any kind of structures that plants can grow on, like a trellis or an arch trellis or a cattle panel, anything you've got. And then the first thing to plot is the things that have limitations, like things that need to trellis, or if you've got a shady area, you know that things that require a lot of sun need to go in a particular area. Use your limitations to your advantage to jumpstart your planning. And after that, plot it all on, move stuff around, and just see what'll work. Try to think through how big the plant will get. If you don't know, Google and think about what will shade out another plant. Do the best you can with a simple plan of what you do know, and look forward to what you're going to learn this year as you watch these things grow together side by side. Another thing you could do is consult a companion planting list, which will tell you what kind of crops like to grow beside each other, like tomatoes and peppers, or tomatoes and cucumbers. Another good thing to know is where your sun's gonna rise and where it's gonna set, so you can kind of have an idea of how it's gonna come over your garden. The other thing that I need to cover before we wrap this up is how long things take to mature, and can it be replaced with something else later in the summer for your fall garden. Now, while you're making this plan, do also think about your fall garden. Now this may be like, whoa, what are you talking about? I'm still trying to get my head around the spring and summer garden, and now you're talking about the fall garden. It is worth thinking about what is going to replace something. So if I'm growing carrots in the spring, if I know that it takes a carrot how long to mature, let's see. It takes carrots. Now if I know that a carrot takes 70 to 80 days to mature, I can see when it tells me that I should be planting carrots outside, March 23rd, and then I can count on 70 to 80 days after that, roughly, and then I know that carrot area can be replaced with something else. You want to keep in mind though, you're not going to harvest all your carrots at once. I mean, maybe you are, depending on how much you're growing. That'll help you plan how much should you be growing. But if you want that area clean, you know that that area is clean for something else if you want it to be around May, and something else can take its place. So you can be thinking about things like that as well. That is a lot, depending on how much of a garden space you have. Think these things through, lots to consider. Like I said, pencil, erase, see what can replace something. And this is the fun part of the garden. I know that this can seem very overwhelming and what to put where and oh, what replaces what. But this is the garden that can work for you. Make it work for you. You can have vegetables, you can have flowers, you can have things replace each other. And that is how you get this garden to give you a bounty of vegetables and fruit. Plan out how long things take to grow, how big they'll mature, what can you plant beside each other that will work really well and love each other. And if I plant this over here, it could give shade to my salad greens, which do want a little bit of shade. And just think through all these things, take the time to figure out what you should plot out on your garden plan, and make a rough map of what could go where. Now I gotta be honest with you, I have done a garden map before, and I would say that I stuck to it 30% of the time. That's okay. This is just a rough idea so that the first time that you get out there, you're not like, what am I doing, where am I putting stuff? Because you will also see that as the season progresses, you're like, whoa, this kale plant is giant. I don't want to put this beside it now, you know? And you'll change your mind, and that is totally fine, but it's nice to have a rough idea so that by the time you get out there, you can just start gardening, watch things come up, and change your mind. So, whoa, that was a lot. You are gonna do so well with even just a simple garden map. Use the resources that you have, think through these things. It could probably take you a couple of days. I know it takes me a couple of days to plan this out. I will probably still change this a lot over the next coming weeks. But that's the fun part about gardening, is that it can change on the fly. This is just a rough plan because we want some kind of direction by the time we get out there. And it's so nice. In the next couple of videos, we're going to talk about keeping garden notes. And you can record everything that you're learning so that next year when you're making this map, you know, oh no, I'm not planting that there, and I'm not doing that beside that. And you've gained all of this experience by growing these plants and learning. So a big part of the garden is learning. So love it, learn to cherish it, and yeah, don't fret too much about it. Just simple, kind of a rough idea. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun with your map over the next couple of weeks, and we'll catch you in the next video.